and they're going to pay for a portion of your overhead, and they're going to pay, in some cases, a profit for you. So in order to do that, they're going to say, we want you to do your accounting the way that we like to see it. And most businesses don't understand what that means or how to do that. And that's where we help, is with that cost volume. Now, since
in your firm?
Now that doesn't count in your 20 pages, by the way. The cost volume's separate. And it's usually submitted electronically. And the same thing with the commercialization report. That's an electronic submission. It doesn't count in your 20 pages. So the 20 pages is just your technology.
So you get paid as a percentage of the grant or a flat fee or hourly?
For us?
Yeah.
Yeah, usually we do time and material just based on the size of the proposal and what kind of work we'd have to do to set that up. Many times companies don't have the basis to come up with those costs, and so we have to help them and show them how to develop that basis. Sometimes they do have that basis. All we have to do is put it together in a way that the government understands it. So it depends client to client. I didn't know I had slides like this, sorry. So the eligibility, the government really wants to see for-profit businesses, less than 500 employees. And like I talked about before, for SBIR, the primary investigator has to be employed by the small business, primarily. You can't have a part-time person be your primary investigator. Now on an STTR, you could have your primary investigator come out of your partner, out of the university or the lab. And like we talked about before, there can be some venture capital involved in the firm. With NIH, it's a higher level of venture capital than it is with the DoD. And then in phase one, with an SBIR, they're going to require that the small business, you, do 67% of the work. So that means you could subcontract a third of the work to another company if you needed to. If maybe you had somebody that had to do one part of your little brace, maybe the end part, the cushion part or something, and you want to subcontract it because these
You
people...
mean a manufacturer or something?
Manufacturer, develop the technology, and you say, okay, we're going to partner with you. We want you to develop this part of it. We can give you a subcontract up to a third of that phase one award, which would be $30,000. And then in phase two, if they were going to manufacture it, you could actually give them, or give this manufacturer that was going to manufacture it for you, a bigger contract, but no more than 50%. So what they're trying to do is make sure that small business employs people itself. So we're going to employ people, we're going to develop that, and we're going to grow the small business. That's the purpose. So again, 3% of the extramural is set aside. 11 agencies, from Department of Transportation, Department of Agriculture. Department of Agriculture is interesting because they don't have a very big extramural budget. But if you happen to have something that might apply there, there's less competition for Department of Agriculture awards than there is for DoD awards.
My client and I got one.
Is that right? Agriculture?
Yes, that was, certainly something interesting and different. I mean,
Right.
It isn't like common.
Right. We worked with a client that did some software for taking satellite images and finding out the most efficient way to use irrigation. And that was funded. So, I mean, it's really interesting. But you wouldn't think of using satellite technology to help with farming, but they did, and they got an award for it. The important thing to remember is that commercialization is an evaluation criteria and becoming more important. For somebody just getting into the program, like all of you, it's not going to have a bearing because you don't have a history. And I think most of the evaluations, when they start looking at it, is if you've had more than 8 SBIRs in your history, then they really start taking a close look at it. But if you only had 1 or 2, they understand that there's risks with funding R&D, and that 1 or 2, you might have 2 bad ones, and you still need to find a good one. That's perfectly acceptable. But if you've had 8 or 10, and nothing's hit, then they start going, something doesn't seem right here. There's something Roger can appreciate. Patent rights with the SBIR go to the small business. And of course, this is somewhat agency specific as well, but normally they give the small business the patent rights, but they ask for a royalty-free, paid-up license to use the technology if they want to. And that's mainly for DoD stuff. So for instance, if you develop a radar, they want to be able to use that without having to worry about who owns the patent, because they paid for it. But they want you to own that patent, that if you can use it for commercial aircraft or whatever, you should, so be it. You can go make money with it. I put down there 33% of the awards go to first-time winners. That's pretty interesting to me, too. I mentioned that there's something like 15 to 16% of the SBIR applications get funded. But of the ones that get funded, 1/3 of them are first-time winners.
You said 15% are successful?
Mm-hmm. On the phase ones. Mm-hmm.
It's not too bad.
That's about 1 out of 6.
Yeah,
Yeah.
1 out of 6, roughly.
But 1/3 of those, that's the first time they've applied for an SBIR. So that's encouraging to the first-time applicant.
Does that include everybody that submitted a proposal, the ones that get rejected for not writing
Mhm.
correctly and all that?
That's
So
correct.
That's the aggregate number of actual
That's
submitted.
The number
proposals.
submitted versus
So
those
if
funded.
you're actually writing the proposal correctly, your odds are even better, right? Or if you've got it
That's right.
written well, because they're not going to get it.
That's right.
If it's more reasonable, your chances go up.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly right. Yep.
Do things like a GSA schedule, or like if you're woman minority owned or something, does any of that have influence on being selected?
No. Unfortunately not. GSA schedule is a good way to sell product to the or service to the government if you have a standard and more of a commercial, what I would call a commercial product or service. Then you can list it there, and the government has basically this GSA catalog. They can go down and say, I need janitorial service. Oh, here's 15 companies that have a GSA schedule for that. And I can pick one of those that's either close to me, or they know that the prices have already been scoured, they're good, and they just use it, and they buy from that. This is totally different.
Okay, good.
They're evaluating that proposal, they're not evaluating you on price.
Yeah.
Well, they are evaluating the price, but you know what the price is, so it's not a big deal. Everybody's coming in with the same price. And 70% of the phase ones go to companies with 25 or fewer employees. 40% to under 10 employees. So again, that's encouraging to people like yourselves.
But your PI has to be full-time in that business.
Yes.
Can you be the PI?
Yes, if you have the knowledge and the expertise, and that's what you would have to explain in your technical proposal. You'd say, yeah, I'm the PI because I have I'm the inventor. I know this. And you explain why you would be the perfect PI. And you say, nobody else can be the PI because I invented it.
Is that pretty common?
It is, yep, it is. Now sometimes you'll see where the PI might be somebody, especially on STTR, where you go in and you say, I'm going to develop this nanotechnology idea, but I'm going to partner with the University of Colorado over here because they have a professor in nanotechnology that really applies to what I'm trying to do. And he's going to be my PI. And then that's powerful because this guy, maybe this professor at CU, is published in all kinds of stuff around the country about leading edge nanotechnology. And the reviewer goes, oh, Professor Gamow, okay, yeah, I've seen his name all over the place. That's powerful stuff. So some of that's a little bit of a game, but when you're the inventor, you've got a really a good leg up because you're the inventor. STTRs. Oops. That's the small business technology transfer. Like we said, there's a lower set aside for that, but still, there's $200 million available this year in STTRs. But it's not available from all 11 agencies. Only the 5 largest budgets qualify for STTR. They have a threshold that they have to meet for so much budget, and if they don't have that much budget, they don't have to do an STTR program. So only 5 agencies have to do it. It's DOD, NASA, Energy, National Institutes of Health, and NSF have an STTR program. The rest of them don't. But it requires collaboration. So if you're connecting with the university, you have to give 30% of that STTR award to the university to help you. So you'll have to have a subcontract. And then 40% of it has to be with you, the small business, and that leaves another 30% that you can subcontract if you want to somebody else. So, to kind of start summarizing, need to identify the funding targets. So with each of you, each of you have a different idea. You might be thinking already in the back of your mind, well, this doesn't apply to Department of Energy, doesn't apply to Department of Agriculture, but it might apply to NSF, might apply to Department of Energy, or Department of Defense. So I'll look at those. So that's really what you want to do, is identify which agencies you think might fund those. And when you first start, you might be surprised. You might want to take a look at some of them just to get an idea. For instance, some of this medical technology, people think Health and Human Services, NIH, but the Department of Defense also funds a lot of medical research too.
Are the awards published to who won? Are they
Yes.
those all published? So you can
That's
go
all
on and
published
actually
knowledge.
read
Yep.
what kind of companies are getting awarded. That might be helpful too to see.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can go in and see who got awarded for what.
Okay.
Yep. Like I said, it's a little bit of a game, and it's different for each agency. So, opposite ends of the spectrum for me are the Department of Defense and the National Science Foundation. Remember, National Science Foundation is where it all started, but they seem to be more forgiving on how you do your accounting. Department of Defense is very strict, but the NSF is very strict on how you can use your funds. You can't use them to develop production, you can't use them to develop marketing, you can only use them for research and development. So they're very strict on how those funds can be used. Where the Department of Defense says, no, we want you to try and develop manufacturing. We'll pay for that. Yes, we want you to be able to commercialize this. We'll pay for some types of marketing. So there's a different set of rules for each agency. Commercial partners are very important in this. It's not so important in phase 1, but in phase 2, the government's going to want to say, who's going to buy this? And you better have done some research and figured out who's going to buy it, and maybe even have some letters saying, yeah, I talked to this ladder manufacturer, and he said, if I could develop this, he would put these, he'd sell these with 70% of his ladders. And here's a letter from somebody at that company. Those are powerful when you get to the phase 2 proposal, those type of things. Or you might say, here's my idea of this mechanical operator, and I've talked to this company over here that makes all these tractor products, John Deere. And here's a letter from the Vice President of John Deere saying, yes, if you can commercialize this product, we'll buy everything you can do and put them on every tractor sold. Those are powerful. And even if it isn't that great, even if the guy says, we'll have great interest in that product, but it's signed by somebody from John Deere, that's a powerful letter to attach to that proposal. Push versus pull. Essentially what they're saying there is the government's interested in, are you going to be able to drive this product into the marketplace rather than sit there and wait for somebody to come by it. You've all heard somebody say, you build a better mousetrap, the world builds a path to your door. That's false. That's pull marketing. You basically have to go out there and figure out what the market is and tell the government what the market is. Show them that you know. And partners, your team, technology partners might be, you know, like with the STTR university, might be a manufacturing person that's going to help you manufacture those. Commercial partners, you might have a partner that's going to help you sell this once you manufacture it. You might have somebody say, hey, I have a distribution channel worldwide, and I can help you once you get that manufactured, bring this to market. That's a powerful partner. So those are all important things for the putting together your proposal. And somebody asked a question a little earlier about where this goes, and so I've got a couple slides here that I think is really important on developing these products going to market. Usually when you're trying to develop a product or service go to market, here's the early stages, here's where you get it out into the marketplace. These are the funding types that you can expect to see going through the different areas. And you can see when you start, typically it's the 4 F's for funding. You know what the 4 F's are?
Family, friends, fools.
Me, myself, and I.
Founder, family, friends, and fools.
Founder, family, friends, and fools. Damn it.
So there's a gap here before you can start really attracting angel people, and they call this a chasm. I mean, Jeffrey Moore wrote a whole series of books about this chasm where small businesses fall into because they can't get to that funding level, and it just drops, business dies. And so that's the whole idea behind some of this SBIR funding is how do we bridge this chasm? How do we get across here? The government also, and I just want to show this for reference for the next slide, the government looks at what they call technology readiness levels, especially in the Department of Defense. So a technology readiness level 1 is a basic principle's been observed of something. So it's pretty raw, pretty an idea at this point. Whereas a technology readiness level 9 means it's in full production and distribution. I can buy it whenever I want it. And then in between, they've defined these other levels of how to develop, how a product moves from idea to production. So the funding levels, from taking from a technology level of 1 to 9, typically fall, here's the 4 F's. So you see, when you're back in the raw ideas, that's where you're at, the 4 F's. But then, this SBIR program is really designed to fill that gap between the 4 F's and when you start getting into some of these higher levels of funding, angels, venture capital, other investments. That's the whole purpose for this program, is to bridge that gap between here and here. And it's non-dilutive funding. When you get out here, you're going to dilute some of your ownership. But it may be necessary to drive these things to market. That's just the way business works. But that we're talking these technology levels from 2 to 4, 2 to 5, where we're developing the first prototypes, seeing if it works. When we get from 5 to 8, we're talking about let's test, let's verify, let's make sure we can manufacture, develop the manufacturing cycle, and then 9 means we're selling this. So that's the whole idea here. And I talked about partners. I really can't stress too much that in the SBIR world, making sure that you've got the support letters from these large businesses are so important. I used to work with a fella, he was a brilliant, brilliant scientist, and he was into this nanotechnology. And we'd get into phase 1, and I'd help him, and I'd say, I'm gonna go out, I'm gonna talk to some people in the industry to see if we can get some support letters. Oh, don't talk to them yet. We're not ready. We don't know if it'll do this. Well, that's the wrong idea. You gotta talk to them now. You gotta say, hey, I've got this, and I think that it will do this for you. Are you interested? And you've gotta whet their appetite. You've gotta get them interested. And if it fails, it fails. You go to another SBIR. You know not all of them are gonna pan out, but you gotta develop those partners early on and keep them interested, because that will really, really help your proposals be accepted by the government. And it'll help you when the technology comes through, because now you've got somebody at that company that goes, yeah, I remember talking to you about that. Yes, I'm interested in that. Let's talk about how we can buy some of those. And that's what you want. The other thing on partners is large primes. And this applies mainly to things like DoD work, NASA work. All these primes have an interest in the SBIR program because it helps them. They can't develop all the technology in the world, but if they can be involved in it, they can get a 30% contract from you to help you, they're interested. And companies like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Northrop Grumman publish a list of their engineers who are interested in the SBIR topics. So if you go to their website after, for instance, when the DoD comes out, and you go to Lockheed, you'll be able to find a list of all the DoD topics and who the engineer at Lockheed is that's interested in that topic. Now there may be some topics where nobody at Lockheed's interested, but usually it's at least half of them. You've got an engineer's name, his phone number and email, that he's interested in that topic. You can get a support letter from him. You might even be able to get some interest and maybe some help. I think all of this is kind of stuff we've talked about. I mean, high-tech startups, you have a lot of risk, and that's one of the things. One of the reasons the SBIR program is what it is the government's trying to minimize that risk, not dilute your company, and help you succeed. That's the whole purpose. I don't know who made these slides, but I sure don't like the way they come up bullet by bullet. Actually, I do know who made the slides. Business requirements. And this is back to what you asked a minute ago, Roger, and that is, how do we help? When you get into these SBIRs, especially the phase 2, they're usually going to require job cost accounting. And it's not just any old job cost accounting, it's what we call job cost accounting on steroids. They got all kinds of different requirements. That's where our experience can help a company, a small business. Then you don't have to worry about figuring all that out. You worry about your technology. We worry about this stuff, but we know this stuff. We've got many years of experience with that. You'll have more scrutiny, and by that I mean the DCAA. I don't know if anybody ever heard of the DCAA? Stands for Defense Contract Audit Agency, and it was started in 1965 by then Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara as a way to verify that contractors were accounting for their costs correctly and billing the government correctly. It's grown today where they do probably 6,000 audits a year. And if you fail an audit, what it means is your accounting system isn't billing the government correctly, and they'll usually stop payment until that's corrected. For a small business, that's not good. So you want to make sure to pay attention as you get into the phase twos. You don't want to ever have to have the DCA come in and say you're not doing things right. And as your business grows, the business acumen, meaning commercialization, accounting, financing, all those things become just as important as the technology. So early on, back there in the technology readiness level 1, 2, your technology is most important. But as you get technology readiness level 5, 6, 7, these other things become just as important, if not more. And the government recognizes that. You just need to make sure that you're on track with that too. I would say that's how a lot of small businesses fail, is they subscribe to the build a better mousetrap theory, which doesn't necessarily work. That's just more rhetoric. I don't know that we need to go through a lot of that. But essentially, what do we do at Reliascent? I think I went over this before too. And we just provide our experience so that you can not worry about some of these back office or support type things, and you can concentrate on what you know best, which is your technology. And that usually provides the best chance for success. So, what are the 3 things we were going to remember today? Okay. Basically, the history of the SBIR program, what it's for, and I don't remember the third one now. Long night. But, no, I know, just that the opportunities are there for you to fund this non-dilutive to make your company grow.
Is there a template that shows us the guideline on how to write one of these?
Yes, and you remember that one solicitation I showed you? That was page 1 of 65, and those 65 pages described in that solicitation what they want to see, how they want to see it written.
Okay.
Now, that's a very general description. Sometimes you might want to Google on the internet and see if you can find somebody who's written one that maybe gives you a little bit more specific idea on some of those things. Or if you're flush with cash, you might want to hire somebody to help you write one, but usually that's the
problem.
That's right, exactly. So I think the best idea is to take the solicitation and say, here's what you want. Technology session is 20 pages. How am I going to organize that? Let's see if I can find some examples, either past ones that have won or others that might be out on the internet. Let's see what a good one looks like. And let's
So
try.
they'll publish them then, if they award it and stuff?
They'll usually publish a synopsis of them. Trying to think if I've seen an actual one published. I know I've seen a lot of actual ones, but I can't remember if they were published or not. But you can find some samples by Googling it on the internet. Yep.
How much, just say on average ballpark, if I was gonna make a proposal, what should I figure on spending, like, to get some help with it and do a decent job on it?
You're probably, to write a proposal, a phase 1, I would guess you're gonna spend between 40 and 80 hours of your time putting that together. And if you want somebody to help you review that, depends on the type of review. The person I know that helps review those will usually charge, I can't remember, it's been a year or 2 since I've used him. Seems to me it was $1,000 to $3,000 depending on the proposal for him to review it and give you comments.
And then you're helped to do the
Yeah, and if you, for a phase one, it's usually not, you don't need much help. You know it's gonna be $100,000, you know it's a fixed price, so you bid $100,000. Now, they wanna see a budget breakdown of that, well, okay, $100,000. I, as the PI, am gonna spend 80 hours at $200 an hour, and I've got 3 people here that are at $100 an hour, they're gonna spend another 15 hours apiece, and that's the budget. So phase one is not difficult. The phase two is where you need the help, and usually that takes 2 to 4 hours of our help at about $200 an hour to help put together a budget for the cost section. But at that point, you also should have a little bit of funding from the phase one. Most agencies will allow a fee, which is profit, but not much. The fee is usually somewhere between 5 and 8%.
Oh, so you could build that in the budget,
Right,
over and above labor, materials,
Correct.
machinery, and all that, okay.
now NSF does not allow a fee. So it's agency to agency type thing, but DOD does. So it just depends. Well, good. Well, I appreciate the time. I hope that's been helpful. I know one of the questions Sheldon had for me was, where do you find this stuff? And the best place is to go to the SBA, Small Business Association, go to their website, and they have a search feature there, and just search for SBIR, and they will tell you about the SBIR program, and then they've got a link to each of the agencies. If you want to go to the SBIR program in DOD, you just click on there and it'll take you to the DOD SBIR website, and then you can go from there.
You said you'd share these files, PowerPoint? You said you'd share this PowerPoint?
You bet.
Well, I could, if you could email me, I can put it out on distribution
Oh, okay.
to everybody,
Sure.
and then we don't have to do it one-on-one.
Okay. Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Okay. And my card's the white one back there, the email.
Okay, well, I think I still have
You
your
already
email
got
address
mine.
too. Yeah.
So one thing I put in, and I'm, that 5 out of 6 that doesn't make it, do they give you feedback?
Yes.
Or can you find out, like, where I fell short?
Absolutely, they give you feedback, and you can ask for
Okay.
a review too. I mean, if you didn't think you got the feedback, or you just heard that, no, I didn't win, then you need to contact them immediately and say, hey, why didn't I win? I'd like a
And then they'll
debriefing.
share that with you.
And they'll share it with
Okay.
you. Yep, absolutely. That's kinda- But yeah, they'll give you the score, like I mentioned, they score those, and they should come back and say, you got a score of 210, and here's why.
Okay, well, that's good, so the next time you can have an idea to focus on.
Right, and that's the key, the next time.
Yeah.
I've got this one client in California, and this poor guy, he's an entrepreneur, brilliant guy. He looks like a cross between Albert Einstein and some guy you'd find underneath the SBIR bridge.
We got
on
the point.
Cherry
We
Creek.
get the point.
What?
We got the point.
But anyway, this guy wrote this wonderful proposal, and he submitted it to the government, and they rejected the SBIR. And he said, well, they don't want my technology. I'm done with them. I said, no, Steve, you've got to submit it again. You've got to change this around. Obviously, they didn't like something. So you got to figure out what they didn't like here and change it around and repropose it. Well, I know. But that's what happens a lot of times. These proposals might get submitted 2 or 3 times and then they're accepted.
Sounds like they can be failed for other reasons than the technology.
They could be failed for reasons other than
Not
the
being,
technology too.
not being hidden correctly would probably be a big one.
Yep,
You said that's the first out.
that's right. Yeah, you
Yeah,
submit
you
a
have to
technology section that's 25 pages and they're going, 20 pages, buddy, can't you read?
Yeah.
Yep,
That
Exactly
saves them
right.
a lot of work, actually.
that's right. That's right. But it's a great program, and if you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to give me a holler. I think you had my email
Yeah,
and
it's
phone
in
number on the
email and
email.
on the website.
Thanks, I was working on
Nice
it.
contact
You
info.
bet.
I wanna be able to look
It's
at
where?
this pretty soon, just to see.
On the email and on the website.
What email's that?
The email that you get about the meeting announcements.
Oh, all I do is get a meetup.
You don't get our regular emails?
I don't know.
The one
Was
that
it-
are with the
Yeah.
purple and black header?
I don't think so.
Really?
I don't think I do.
I'll see if you're on the email list.
Okay, make sure you got it.
I thought you were.
Well,
Usually-
I have to. Okay, I'll look and see.
Roger, I'll follow up with you, I've gotta run. Really
Okay.
Nice to meet you, yeah. I'll follow up.
I got the white cards up there, just grab one.
Cause I'm looking for a industrial designer and manufacturer, so.
Okay.
If you got any good ideas, that'd be great. Really nice to meet you, Frank. Thank you.
You bet.